Hello and welcome to this weekly live session with me, Moneer, as your business analyst. In those sessions, I like to go through the latest market updates and try to find some good um, trading opportunities. The most important update recently was the Fed's decision to keep rates unchanged. However, it's likely that um, in its next meeting on September, it will cut rates. Markets are showing that there is an 80% chance or more of the Fed cutting rates in its September meeting. However, there are two things to pay attention to. First, there is the Jackson Hole Symposium later this month. I think it starts on the 21st of August, and Jerome Powell will have a speech there. It's likely to be a market mover, so keep an eye on that. The second thing to pay attention to is that there will be several data points to keep an eye on until the next Fed meeting. I focus a lot on the Fed meeting because it's a market mover and markets do pay attention to interest rates and interest rate expectations. So it's important for traders and investors as well to keep an eye on monetary policy as they make decisions. Um, Recent inflation figures were positive. They showed 2.7% inflation back in July um, on a year-on-year basis, and that confirmed the probability, the likelihood that the Fed will cut rates in September. And as we can see here, I'm going to show you the main equity benchmarks. As we can see here, markets are still moving in an uptrend. We can start with the Dow Jones. The Dow Jones is still moving in an upward trend. It has actually broken a key support level to the upside here, as we can see. Even though it has retraced below it, we can still see that it has bullish momentum. Looking at other indices such as Euro stocks, it has also broken a trend line. So it's still bullish. And we will look at stock TA in a minute. The NASDAQ 100 has been bullish for a while. And despite this recent bearish candle, uh, the overall long-term trend is still bullish. Now let's move to stock TA to look at some indices and some currency pairs. Let's start with QQQ. This technology index is usually sensitive to interest rate changes and interest rate expectations. So I like to look at it first. We can see here that it has several important support levels that have not been broken. Um, Traders might want to wait for it to go back to this support level at 572, a strong support level with a confluence score of 10 to establish long entries. We still have some room to go to the um, upwards, especially given that the RSI is still around 70. It can still go up to 80 before showing pullbacks. The trend scores show a nuanced picture, actually. It's still bullish in the short term, but we see a neutral signal on the intermediate and long runs. This can mean that it might still face a small pullback before continuing to the upside. I want to look at a few currency pairs, especially in light of the dollar weakness throughout the latest weeks. The dollar has been weak since the beginning of this year. However, recently we see that it's showing some sign of strength. We can see here, looking at the euro dollar chart, we can see some signs. This is the inverted uh, uh, chart. This is the dollar euro. So we can check the the euro dollar chart. We can see some signs of consolidation and some dollar strength on this chart. Um, this means that the dollar might be regaining strength, and some analysts say that the dollar doesn't really move in tandem with interest rate expectations. So just because the Fed is expected to cut rates does not mean the dollar is just going to be extremely weak. There are other factors at play here, and the latest bearishness or weakness in the dollar may be due to some hedging activity and not just selling activity. So it's a nuanced picture, and it's important for traders to not assume a linear relationship between interest rate expectations and how the dollar moves. So to look again at the euro dollar chart, we see some consolidation here. We might see some pullback. The price might break through some support levels, but there is still a staunch support level at 1.16. So traders might want to use that as a launching pad to establish long entries. We can look at other uh, currency pairs such as the USD against the Canadian. We see a similar consolidation, weakness that is followed by a consolidation, and this might be followed by a strength in the dollar. Looking here, we see some resistance levels. This is due to the trend that preceded this consolidation, but we also see some support levels starting to become activated here. Um, we might see some deeper correction here to the upside before we see any resumption of some weakness in the dollar. So it's important to keep an eye on that. And we see here that the long term trend is very bearish here. It's minus 0.56. So it's still very bearish in the long run. It can still show pullbacks here, but it might resume its decline following a pullback. We can look as well at the sterling against the dollar. We see a very similar move to what we saw on the euro dollar, an uptrend followed by a consolidation and perhaps a pullback. We have several important support levels at play here, and only few resistance levels, but we might see some profit taking activity before this uptrend resumes, and we might want to wait to see what the Fed might say, what Jerome Powell and other uh, members of the Fed might say, because it can impact how the dollar moves from there. We can finally look at the US dollar against the Swiss franc. And again, we see a bearish trend, weakness in the dollar followed by uh, consolidation. So there is a lot of indecision recently when it comes to the dollar. And remember, the dollar is pivotal in financial markets, not just for currencies, but also for equities and for stocks. So it's important to keep that in mind. And Again, it's important to keep an eye on the upcoming data points. There are still a few data points to watch out for, like unemployment figures, inflation, purchasing managers index, and so forth, because they will impact what the Fed will do in its September meeting. We still believe the Fed is going to cut rates, but we don't know what will happen until that point. So um, be sure to set your stop losses at a good spot and manage risk accordingly. So, as always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to answer them as soon as possible. And trade responsibly and profitably, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you for watching.